Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to have Manali here. She's amazing. I met her at the Creative Educator Conference back in January, and we had such a great time. I don't even know how we got connected, Manali. Was it like, were we in a small group together? Is that what it was?
I I can't remember. I know that I had
Yeah.
like known who you are. It's like one of those
Okay.
things where you're like, I know you from Instagram, but I'm meeting you for the
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
time. And it's
Yeah.
like so fun being in person, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Super
so
fun. She's the
super glad we
sweetest.
got.
Yeah, I'm really excited. So we just recorded for her YouTube channel, and if you want to check that out, I'll leave that in the link below, but definitely go follow her. She's amazing. But she's going to talk to us about quarterly planning today, which I'm really excited about because it is April 2nd when we're recording this, and it means new month, new week, and new quarter. So I personally, so just a little background with like quarterly planning, I really don't, aside from like this year was the first time I was more like into it, but I really have not done like strategic goal setting and goal planning really much like any time in my business. So I'm really excited to hear more from you. But yeah, tell us about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Manali. I am an editor for wedding photographers as well as a business coach. I started out as a wedding photographer, and that is kind of when I started kind of getting into quarterly planning. I do not take credit for the system. I learned about it from Kat Schmoyer, who's now an integrator, and I started using it because the first year that I was running my business plan per se was like a Word document. And I was like, here's all 12 months. Here's all the things I'm going to do and like accomplish within this year. And
Yeah.
it was going okay until about August was when I kind of really started to be like, oh, holy crap, things keep like getting moved because I was in the midst of like busy season and everything like that. And I was like, okay, like some of the things that I originally had like set out to do, like these aren't exactly like the most relevant anymore. And I was like, okay, I think I need to have like a better system and something that I can kind of like come back to at multiple points throughout the year to like almost allow myself to like reset a little bit and like see what happened over like the last 90 days, like if anything like dramatically changed to be able to like account for that and not be like rambling, still trying to stick to this like one plan that I had set myself like
Yeah.
9 months ago or like 6 months ago. Um, and the other really big thing that really led me to adopt quarterly planning and feel like it was very helpful was as a wedding photographer, my business was pretty seasonal in terms of like when people were booking, when I was like photographing the most, when I had some more time for like more business related projects versus when I was very much so like into like working in the business a lot for my clients. And so quarterly planning kind of allowed me to like break up the whole year and to be like, okay, like for this specific quarter, like here is where I'm putting my focus to not feel like I had to do like everything all at the same time. So that's a little bit about why I kind of got into it. And I'm just gonna like overview the whole process and then we can dive into the details a little bit more. But basically, all that quarterly planning really is taking a set amount of time, like outside of running the day to day of your business every quarter. So every 3 months to kind of reflect on what happened over the past 90 days. I give myself some time to like tweak anything or like work on any like projects that maybe I just didn't have time for within the last 90 days. Like if my website needs to be updated with something pretty critical instead of like pushing it off until like slow season, like I give myself implementation time for things like that. Um, I overview everything in the business and kind of do like almost a mini audit as a whole, specifically around my marketing, my client like services and process, as well as my like business and the business projects and team and everything like that. And then I give myself a loose game plan and for the upcoming 90 days of like, what are the projects that I want to work on? How can I break those down into steps so that I'm not staring at like the whole project as a to do on my planner for any given day? And I actually kind of start to slot out when I'm going to work on what throughout the upcoming quarter based off of my schedule. And will things shift and change as I like maybe book something last minute? Like, absolutely. But I try to give myself a little bit of margin so I can play around with it over the next 90 days. But when I sit down to my computer every single day or every single week, I kind of already know what the focus is, or have a game plan of like what I want to be working on, and like building momentum towards any given month or any given quarter. So that's the whole process in a nutshell.
I love it. So I'm very organized, and so my detailed brain is like going crazy over here because
Mhm.
I love like all that you're saying and that you're planning it out. But I also like the fact that it's not like a yearly plan. So like every quarter I feel like is so different and things change like constantly. So even like when I was going to the Creative Educator Conference, I went into that conference with like goals for Q1 and
Mhm.
courses I wanted to create and different like areas I wanted to grow my business. And then once I came out of that like conference, I literally 180'd and I was like, okay, no, this is like where I want to go. And I feel like
Mhm.
there's so much to be said about having room to change your plan and like, have like a loose overarching like goal for that year, but like having the quarterly plan and like being able to reassess at different points in the year, I think is so valuable. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Where do you usually start? So for me, I feel like I just am when it comes to planning, I
Mhm.
like I said, I'm very organizational and I love Google spreadsheets, Google Docs, like all those things. But where do you feel like you start so that you're not like overwhelmed? Because sometimes when I sit down to do like a quarterly plan, for instance, I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, like there's so much to think through. Or like I don't want to like name drop any like specific people because I don't want to talk bad about anything. And it wasn't bad, but it was like some of the planners you get that are like 90-day planners,
Mhm.
like goal sheets and things like that. I would like open one and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much to think about. Like if they'd ask you all these questions and like you have to think about this, this, and this. I'm like, I just want to like set goals. I don't know all this is. So
Mhm.
walk me through like how you approach it in the very
Mhm.
beginning for someone who's like maybe never quarterly planned before and can tend to get overwhelmed with the idea of like tackling it.
Yeah, so I actually tell people to start with your calendar first,
Mhm.
because you have a cap on the amount of time and energy that you have in a given like day, week, or quarter. So I would tell people like pull out a calendar, look at the upcoming 90 days. Like, are there any days that you are taking off for vacation or anything that you have going on personally? And then look at like the client work that you have in there first. Like I am very much so like a put my clients first, but then also treat my business like a client. But as a photographer, like you're like March through June, like that's going to be super busy. And so you want to know like what if you're a photographer, like what shoots do you have on the calendar? How many days after do you need for like editing and getting that like turned back around for your clients? So I say look at that first so that you have a good idea of like, okay, how much time do I actually have to work on anything like different or new? So I always start with like, what does my calendar look like? From there, I actually go through and make a loose marketing plan to be like, okay, based off of my calendar, like, do I know what I am like selling and like really focusing on services wise? Because again, that's like generating the income for your business, which if we're running a business, we don't want it to just be an expensive hobby. We want it to be profitable. So I'll look at, okay, like what is the marketing work that needs to happen? And from there, from the white space remaining on my calendar, I start to think about are there anywhere between zero, I would say 0 to 3 business projects, or goals or anything like that that you want to make some progress on that you can kind of slot into that extra time. And I say 0 to 3 just because I want to give people permission. Like, I think a lot of times in the online space, there's this narrative of like, you must always be growing, or like, if you're not growing, you're dying, which I hate
Mhm.
that saying so much. But like, I think it's okay. Like, if you have a really packed season, maybe with something personally going on, or it's like something personal and your business is like, you have busy season, like, it's okay to like just tell your brain to be like, okay, like this quarter, I'm working on like serving my clients really well and like making sure that I'm good on a personal front. And that is good. And that is like no less worthy than having like 3 to 7 like business goals that you're also trying to dump and like work on in there and then overwhelming yourself. I think that that's kind of like the overwhelm sometimes comes from us trying to do more than we physically have time and like capacity for. So I would say then look at the 0 to 3 like goals that you maybe have or projects. I really try to think of them as projects in the business rather than goals, because projects to me are a little bit more action oriented of like you are in charge of like actually taking these action steps to hopefully get like the end goal, like the end result, you know, that you're hoping for. Like you have control over the actions. So that's kind of where I start. Does that answer your question, or did you have any other
Yeah,
questions from
no,
that?
definitely. And I think it's so important to remember that this type of thing, I think with anything in business, but specifically planning or like goal setting, I think in our heads we have like this idea of like, oh, it has to be like this big thing where it's like we're gonna set our goals and like we're gonna be tied to them. And it just seems like overwhelming in theory and like in our heads. But like you just saying, it's literally just looking at your calendar, like seeing what you have on deck and like just planning
Mm-hmm.
around that is just so it feels like a weight lifted. So yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
makes total sense. Okay. So walk us through maybe like your process in terms of like beyond the calendar. What are your like best tips or like your process for the quarterly planning?
Yeah. So one of my best tips for starting to implement this is like either at the beginning of the year or like now at the beginning of Q2, like actually go through and block off time on your calendar to have space to quarterly plan, you know? So I always try to give myself at least 2 business days. But I am full time in my business. So this is really up to you and how much time you want to give yourself. Like this could be 2 hours a quarter or like a 2 hour block every single quarter, whatever is feasible for you in your schedule. Go ahead and like block that time off in advance. Put it on a Google Calendar or something so that if something has to be scheduled over it, like you can kind of like move and shift it around, but
Mhm.
you're like preemptively planning to actually take that time out of like running the day to day of your business. And then for actually like implementing that, that's on you to like set the boundary and really treat your business like as a client to actually take it. But my number one tip is to just go ahead and set that time aside. And then the second thing is to give yourself a little bit of time to just reflect on the last 90 days. Like I always say, I don't even remember what I had for lunch like 3 days ago. So sometimes I'm like so in the day to day of things that I like will forget like what happened like 2 to 3 months ago, or like
Mhm.
what are some of the wins and like milestones that I'm celebrating, and like really just like reflecting over like how did the last 90 days go, like outside of like what happened yesterday. Because looking back at like what actually happened is I think really key before you start to like plan for the future, so that like you're like, okay, like I remember that I had a client situation where maybe I could have like prepped them a little bit better to like avoid some friction in the future. Like that's something to flag right from the last 90 days that maybe you want to account for as you're like planning out your goals for the upcoming 90 days, things like that. So take some time to actually like reflect on what happened first, and then I say, take some time to kind of like review the different parts of your business. So I said at a high level, I kind of look at like what are the business projects, what is the marketing look like, and what does like the client experience look like, right? I would also add in there like take a look over your website. Like, is it functioning well? Like take a look at like your workflows and your processes. Again, I'm a very like organized person. And so I have a checklist of everything that I kind of like audit within my business. And again, this is kind of giving me information of like one, what is working well, and two, like where is there a gap that maybe I need to kind of solve for within the upcoming 90 days. So I try to do a really like a good audit of everything. And I also do account for like how did it feel over the last 90 days? Like, was I super overwhelmed? Like, what did my time and my work hours and my boundaries and things like that? Like, how was that over the last 90 days? Because I think when we're in like the daily grind or like just like, you know, in our business in and out, sometimes it's you miss those little things to be like, oh, I've actually been working like more than I normally do, or outside of like the work hours that I really wanted to hold myself to. So I think again, like auditing everything like from a tangible perspective in your business, but also like how are you feeling? How are you doing as like the business owner who is like running everything? Like, do you feel like you need to maybe like bring someone on to help with any specific areas of your business? I think that that's like a really good check-in point to be like, okay, let me really look at the business like as a whole and me like in the business running it.
Mhm.
And then from there, I always say, like, take a look at if you have like a place where you kind of keep your business like ideas, or like I call it my parking lot.
Hmm.
of just like different things that I might want to do in my business and implement in my business. I do a quick cursory glance over that. And I take all of that information and then I kind of set those like goals. And so with those goals, I'll choose again, like I mentioned, 0 to 3. And then I work really hard to start to kind of like break them down into action items. And I tell people like, make sure that it's as broken down as an action item that's going to take you like max like 15 to 30 minutes. Like that's how far down I break it down because if you're working on something new specifically, your brain is automatically going to be like, "Oh, this is unfamiliar. Like I don't know what I like if I want to work on this, like it might feel a little like scary to your brain, but like bringing it down into a task that's only going to take like 15 to 30 minutes lowers
Yeah.
the activation energy of like wanting to get started. Um, and so I always tell people like you might not know every single step that it's going to take to be able to like finish out the goal, but at least start somewhere with breaking it down. And if you are like, I have no idea, like take that to your business coach, like take that to
Hmm.
Nicole and be like, hey,
Yeah.
can you help me like break this down into tangible steps?
Mhm.
And so what I do is I will sometimes I just do it on paper first, and then I do take it to my project management system. Like I could not live and run my business without it. And then I start to kind of put things in on the days that I know that I have the space and the bandwidth outside of like my shoots and my editing. And so
Mhm.
that is kind of like what the whole process looks like. Again, I give myself 2 days because this is like a lot of work. I don't like to rush it. Like I like to give myself some time to really like reflect, really think on it, really make sure I'm like evaluating like okay, out of like the 7 ideas, like what 3 kind of make the most sense for the
Mhm.
upcoming months. And then I usually try to fit like one project per month because my brain really likes it when I'm like, as much as I can do all the things and enjoy working on all the things all at once, my brain does so much better if I'm like, okay, this month I'm like working on, like creating an engagement session style guide. That's always
Mhm.
my example. But for you, it
Mhm.
could be like anything like updating this one specific page on my website or anything like that.
Yeah.
Like having that monthly focus is really helpful. And so that is kind of the whole process. I do have a Google document for people as like a freebie
Mhm.
that I can share that walks you through like all of the details of like when I say evaluate your marketing plan, like these are kind of the things that I'm looking at. But I tell people like take this overall template and make it your own. Like add anything that you're like, oh, I wish I like would think about this every single 90 days, or like I don't need to like evaluate the income from every single income stream that I have because I have one income stream, things like that. Like take the template, make it your own. But like it's a good base for if you're like, I don't even know where to start with quarterly planning, or like I don't know what all to even evaluate in my business. I think that that can be a really great place for people to start. And I can share that with you so that they have the link to that.
I would love that. Yeah, we'll put the link in the show notes for sure. That sounds great. I love what you're saying about activation energy. That was cool. Like the whole making it something that's an action that's like 15 to 30 minutes to do. It's so true. Like when I have a huge wedding to edit and it's like
Mm-hmm.
I know it's going to take hours and hours. I'm like, oh, I don't want to like start on that. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
same can be for quarterly planning. So really just like narrowing it as far down as possible for those action items, I think is great. And I also like the parking lot idea. I thought
Mm-hmm.
that was a really good idea. Yeah, I'm gonna have to start doing that. And I need to download your freebie now too, because I don't think I have, so I need to. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's super helpful for helping you just break things down. And honestly, like the activation energy thing, I feel like that's something that I still have to catch myself. Like I'll put something
Mhm.
on my like to-do list and then be like, Denali, like this is like a 2 hour thing, like at least. Like let me try breaking this down into like
Yeah.
a manageable chunk. And the really cool thing about our brain too is like if you can kind of cross off that first little task that like
Mhm.
gives you the little reward and like hit of dopamine, which is going to
Yeah.
make you want to like continue to like knock off the little tasks and feel like you're actually making progress versus like you're putting something that's like a 2 hour task and then like you're always like moving it over to the next
Mhm.
day. And it's like your brain obviously doesn't love that. And
Yeah.
so it's something that I always have to catch myself in. And I know, like, I know this and I speak about this, but it's something I always
Mhm.
have to remind myself of too.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and you do a lot of psychology work too, like with creatives. Yeah, that's cool. Maybe we'll have to have you on the podcast again to talk about all that because I love that type of stuff. Just like
Mhm.
knowing what our brains respond to really well. And I think you're so
Mhm.
right. When you put tasks off like day after day, it just like adds to the stress and it adds to the overwhelm.
Mhm.
So I love that, you have these goals and like you said, you have one per month. It's like not like these crazy
Mhm.
overreaching things. It's like these are the things I'm going to focus on, and it really helps align where we're at in our
Mhm.
businesses. And then we take it a step further and like do, those really, really key action items that are very focused and narrow. So I love that. That's awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Mhm.
Is there anything you want to share? I know the freebie definitely will put a link for that. Anything else you want to share in terms of, I know I have a lot of photographers listening, so maybe they
Mhm.
will want to hire you for editing
Mhm.
and maybe another type of service. Will you tell us more about where they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm primarily on Instagram and I share really fun like business and planning tips and editing tips over there. I'm at Manali Sontakke. And then my website is manaliphotography.com. And I will make sure that I get the link to the quarterly planning Google Doc over to you so you can have that in the show notes. But I would love to just connect with you guys further over there. I love talking with photographers about everything business and psychology related too. And so I just wanted to thank you for having me on the podcast. It was so much fun and I can't wait for you to hopefully try out the planning process and hopefully your listeners took something really fun away from today's conversation.
Yeah, I know I did, and I'm about to get the Google Doc and do it today, probably because of the Q2 is here. So that sounds
Mm-hmm.
awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it. You're so sweet. And thanks for joining us. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon.